secretary to call the roll.
Okay, Greg.
Present.
Hey. Gus.
Here.
And
Here.
Claire.
Here.
Kimberly.
Here.
I'm here. And Dan.
Yes, here.
Okay.
All right, new order of business. I am attending remotely due to a medical emergency. And let me find the memo from Tim Fox on this matter. 3 months for emergency circumstances, but emergency circumstances has to be allowed at the beginning of each meeting by majority vote. In other words, I can serve as your Zoom DJ, but in order to be a voting attendee, we require the council to vote by majority that I be allowed to participate as a voting member. So I don't think I'm allowed to vote on that. Scott, could you call the vote for whether or not I can participate as a remote attendee under emergency circumstances?
What? That is a dumb, ridiculous.
Okay,
I
Dan.
hear you, Frank.
Yes.
Claire.
Yes.
Kimberly.
Yes.
I vote yes. Dan
Yes.
and Gus.
Yes.
Okay, that's 6-0 for Greg to be voting.
Okay, thank you. We
You're
begin then
bonafide.
with the normal Board of Supervisors report, and I'm going to call on Mike O'Neill first because he has done such a great job of preparing a set of notes from the supervisor's office. They are now posted on the website under agenda item 1, supervisor staff report, but he's going to tell us what's in them anyway. Mike?
Hello, everybody. Happy Wednesday, the September 13th. Let's see. The first is the County Elections Division is seeking vote center staff. And that's the people that, help with the democracy, get the votes down to Redwood City to be enumerated, and they're starting vote center training is tentatively expected to begin January 3rd, 2024. Your duties include training on San Mateo election procedures, how to use vote center equipment, vote center setup, and voter assistance. And those hired can expect to work for approximately 9 weeks, including on-job site training, teaching classes, and working. And I did look it up, and I believe the pay is somewhere around $20 to $30 an hour. And they are expecting that you will have to work some overtime. And I'm sure everybody is quite happy about this, but aircraft operations are resuming at Half Moon Bay Airport. The runway construction project at the Half Moon Airport is now complete, and pilots are resuming normal operations at the airport. However, San Carlos will be closed September 11th through October 10th. If you do have a noise complaint for either airport, you can use the airport's noise comment form or call the hotline at 844-266-6266. And then there's another number, 650-573-3700, or email airports@smcgov.org if you want information on any construction projects at the airport. And there is, when I say go to the website, if you go to the MCC website, there's links to all these different, if you want to apply as an election worker, if you want to submit a noise report. And since me and Harvey, I think both fall under this category, they actually are doing a survey of older adults, Harvey. And it's for people over age 55. Huh?
Speak for yourself, Mike.
Oh, okay, Harvey. I guess, okay. Yeah, sorry about that. You must be 49, right? And to take the first ever statewide needs assessment for older adults, participation will shape and communities are inclusive, supportive, and responsive. It's a survey. It's available in many languages: Spanish, Cantonese, Mandarin, Korean, Tagalog, Vietnamese, Hindi, and Arabic. And it closes. Oh, it is closed. Sorry about that. I missed that one. Oh, but we have a new friend here I remember from my youth and when I was in high school, and that's West Nile virus is back in the county. And if you please, there's some cautionary stuff at the San Mateo County Health website organization, West Nile virus. They've also, when I went to the Farm Bureau, have discovered fruit flies there was one bird dead with fruit flies from in Foster City. So there's a quarantine on vegetables going in and out of Santa Clara County. So just to be aware, but if you are, but people have, West Nile virus does not spread through coughing, sneezing, or person-to-person contact. It's only if you get bit by a mosquito. And if you want to know anything more about it, go to the San Mateo County Health Organization, West Nile virus. Okay, so here's two important announcements that have a direct effect on the Midcoast. Tomorrow, on September 14th, from 1:30 to 3:30, the Coastside Design Review Meeting is being held at Supervisor Mueller's office at the Shops at Harbor Village, 270 Capistrano, Unit 6. And that is for the Cypress Point project. So that's tomorrow from 1:30 to 3:30. And then there's another one that is being held on Tuesday, September 19th from 6 to 8 p.m. And that is the Moss Beach State Route 1 Congestion and Safety Improvements Project. And it's to improve traffic flow and safety on State Route 1 from 16th Street to Cypress Avenue, which includes the three major intersections of State Route 1, 16th Street, State Route 1, California Avenue, and State Route 1, Cypress Avenue. And the project aims to improve safety and accessibility for drivers. And this will be the first time they've ever done this, is whatever displays, walls, or maps they have will be on display at the office. So if you do miss the meeting and you want to come and look at the exhibits that they're going to show at the meeting, come by the office, and they will be there until September 21st. And then I believe they'll be removed the next week, sometime, date to be set. But that's September 19th, 6 to 8 p.m. at Supervisor Mueller's Coastside office, Unit 6 at 270 Capistrano Road. And that's all I have. Are there any questions?
All right, point of order. Would PCTV please scan the council members now with the camera instead of Mike, so I can tell whether people are raising their hands on the council? And I have a question for council members about what Mike just said. I will not be able to attend the start of tomorrow's CDRC review meeting on Cypress Point's aesthetics. Will other council members be able to attend? Any?
No.
Yes.
Ann will. Okay. All right. I still plan to show up, but I'm going to be late. All right. So now let me take questions from the council if I can see any hands raised.
Claire?
Claire has a question.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Regarding the survey of older residents, did you say that was finished?
Yeah, actually,
Okay.
I'm surprised that I missed that date when it was there. The survey closes Monday, September 4th. So
I have a question on that survey because, and you probably don't know the answer, but maybe you can find out, or you can tell me who
it was a
is.
state survey.
Yeah, but it was when you logged in, which I did because I'm over 50. You tell them what county you're in, and then it gets your county data. And I was hoping that there was a way that could identify what part of the county you were in.
Did they ask for your zip code?
At one point they did, but I think it was optional. So I was just wondering how much valuable data the county is going to get from it.
I can ask. I'll have to figure out who,
Who gets it?
yeah, who gets the question. But yeah, it's a survey. Okay, results. Local. Okay.
Thank you.
Uh-huh.
Any other council questions for Dan?
Mike, on the Moss Beach corridor project, we heard from Chandra last meeting, and
It's the same project.
yeah, and before Supervisor Mueller was elected, I showed him several photos of all wide variety of pedestrian underpasses that are being built across the nation, around the world. And he told me that he was open to looking at these. And I put in a phone call to him, and I haven't heard back yet. So can I ask?
I'll send him an email to be sure he calls you.
Yeah,
Yeah.
okay, yeah, in regards to that, hopefully before the meeting.
Oh, before
September.
1:30 tomorrow?
No, the.
Oh, right,
last week.
Tuesday,
yes,
before
right,
1:30
right.
to 6 p.m. Okay, I'll be sure to let him know.
Appreciate that.
I'm assuming he has your phone number, or do you want?
Yes.
Why don't you write it down and I'll
Okay.
have it then.
Other council questions for Mike? Seeing none. We have a question from the public, Sid Young.
Hi, Mike. Can you hear me?
Yep, I can hear you, Sid.
Oh, great. I have a few questions, so you might want to grab your pen. First of all, this isn't a question, it's more of a statement. You mentioned West Nile virus, and then you mentioned dead birds and fruit flies, but I'm pretty sure fruit flies just infect fruit and don't kill birds. But West Nile virus, one of the symptoms of is dead birds lying around. And that's supposed to be reported to the county or to vector control, which is the mosquito abatement district.
Correct. The mosquito abatement one is the one that's really watching the West Nile virus. And then the agriculture department's really watching the fruit fly issue.
Yeah, but you
because
said
that's really more South County because that's where most of the agriculture is.
But you said they kill birds and the fruit flies don't kill the birds. I think you might have conflated the two.
Oh, yeah, no, the West Nile virus was found in a dead bird.
Okay.
Yes, was found in a dead bird. I think it was in Foster City.
Okay.
And
You said fruit flies. That's why I'm
is-
mentioning it.
Is present in Santa Clara County. They've established a quarantine. And I'm trying to remember if they said they found a fruit fly here, but they've set up extra traps to try to see if they can, stop it from coming here.
I hope they do. I remember the medfly scare from back in the day. So
Right.
the other
The
two
same
things
fly,
I
Mediterranean, same fly, Mediterranean fruit fly.
right. The other two things I wanted to say was the airport. I believe I read that the airport was putting in some technology so they could bill airplanes who are taking off from both San Carlos and from Half Moon Bay or possibly landing. But do you know if that applies to touch and goes also?
I have no idea what the airport does. Well, I mean, I know what it does, but I have no idea about that.
Could you find out and get back to us? It's hard to reach Gretchen
Is there a
Kelly.
specific question? How does the airport, what the landing fees are at the airport? Is that what you're asking?
Well,
I
okay,
think
yes.
the question is going to be on behalf of a large number of people concerned about touch and goes. Is the airport installing technology to charge fees, okay, for excessive touch and goes or for landing at Half Moon Bay in order to curtail excessive use of the airport for training purposes?
Oh, okay.
That's no question, but that's okay. If you can find out the answer to that, that would be great. I believe they've already installed the technology at both San Carlos and Half Moon Bay. But the question I had was if touch and goes are part of that billing. So it would be great because mostly pilots fly into our airport to practice from other airports. And then the last question I have is to a follow-up. I had a little drive around with Ray Mueller, and we did not go on Devil's Slide because he said you live in Pacifica and he would ask you to follow up. But since January, there's been a lot of storm debris on our shoulders, especially through that eucalyptus forest before the tunnel or after the tunnel, whichever direction you're going. And also there's been a lot of dead trees and branches and stuff along the shoulders that they've never cleared since January. And he said you were going to look into that.
I did send an email. You asked this not the last meeting, but the meeting before. And
No, I
did
asked him personally, and he said you were gonna.
Okay, well, you asked me at the last meeting I was at, and
Oh,
I
I
did
didn't
send
remember.
an email to the to Caltrans. However, sometimes I think they have a shredder open their email.
Do you have anybody you can call?
I got one name, and I'll try them again.
Okay,
Okay,
maybe you could
but I
report
can't-
back at the next meeting. Thanks.
Yeah, I can't guarantee anything.
All righty, thank you.
Sure. And Greg Ann
All
had
right.
her. I don't know if you could see her or not.
I don't see Ann with her hand up.
Oh, I thought you did.
No, oh no, I was just answering when she was talking about the fruit fly. I was just
Oh.
saying that it was because somebody imported
Okay,
fruit illegally and
yeah.
brought the flies.
Okay,
That it?
thank you, Mike, for that
Sure.
update. And we now move on to the esteemed counselor from Half Moon Bay, Harvey Barback.
Thanks, Greg. I'm not that esteemed. I have 3 announcements related to Main Street in Half Moon Bay. The first one is that the city council has hired a firm to do what we're calling a streetscape to make Main Street more vibrant and exciting and a place that more people would like to go to. And if you have suggestions or questions, tomorrow, all day at the library, there's going to be representatives from that company that will talk to you, let you give your suggestions. This is the last day of a 3-day charrette where we're trying to find out what people have, what ideas they have to improve Main Street. And that goes all the way from North Main Street at Highway 1 all the way down to where the fire station is. So the first phase is to identify what people would like to do. Ultimately, we're going to make bids to actually do some improvements, perhaps something like the 4 blocks around City Hall being traffic free. That's one possibility. One-way streets, wider sidewalks. There's lots of ideas that people have. So if you have an idea to make Main Street better, tomorrow would be a good time to come to the library and vent.
what
the
time?
second- excuse me?
Till what time until what time?
Actually, it's going to be all day, 9 a.m. to 5 p.m. There's going to be an hour off for lunch. The second item that's related to Main Street has to do with the fact that the city has finally signed a lease at 637 Main Street to have what we're calling the Coastside Opportunity Center housed there. That's something we've been trying to get going for a few months now. And that Opportunity Center is going to have classrooms. It's going to have an incubator eventually for startups. It's going to be a place where you can get internet access, where you can learn about jobs available. So it's going to be, it's modeled after what South San Francisco has done very successfully. And the Chamber of Commerce is going to be running a lot of it. And the current location of the chamber near North Main Street is going to move there so that people who want to have information about the coast side can go to 637 Main Street. And that's going to be opening very soon, a couple of weeks. So we're excited about that. And my last item about Main Street has to do with our end of summer music festival, which we had hoped would be at Carter Park, but Carter Park is under construction. So it's going to be near City Hall, near MacDutra Plaza, near Kelly Avenue, on September 23rd, Saturday, all day. And it should be a nice time. We're going to have kids' activities, food trucks, lots of bands. So, and it's free, of course. So please come if you are able. That's September 23rd. And I'll be happy to answer any questions. Claire.
I think you said, I'm happy to hear that the Opportunity Center is opening up. I think you said that the city had signed the lease on the space. Can you clarify, is this a city-county partnership? Did the county also sign a lease?
The city has signed the lease, but the funding is coming from a grant that the county has given the city.
So this is a city program.
Yeah, I guess you'd call it a city.
I'm
program.
disappointed if that's the case. Do you know, Mike?
It's run through the Renaissance Center in South San Francisco, which is out of San Francisco. And they're basically trying to help teach business people how to be a business person, how to run computers, billing, etc. And the Renaissance Center gets grant money from the governor's office. And they might have gotten some money from the county, but I don't know whether the original money came from.
That's not my question. My question is the Opportunity Center that's being set up in Half Moon Bay, which I thought was a joint city-county partnership, apparently is not.
I don't believe it's with the county. It might be county money, but it's probably city Half Moon Bay.
I wish we
That's
had
what
been
South
involved. I
San
wish we had been
Francisco-
involved in how that happened.
That's what San Francisco says.
Well, I don't really care too much about what's going in South City right now. I'm concerned that this is a program where county money is going to the city rather than to the whole coast side.
Bit rate's not
It's-
involved. Yeah.
It's meant to serve the entire coast side, Claire.
Well, then the whole coast side should be represented in some way. That's all.
Do we have other council questions for Harvey? Seeing none, we have Sid Young who has questions for Harvey.
Hi, Harvey. First I heard it was going to be across the street from the chamber in the old Coal Banker building. Did they move it down the street because they didn't get enough funding from San Mateo County, or did you have the address mixed up?
No, I have the correct address.
All right.
It looked for a while. The site you're talking about was under consideration, but
Okay.
ended up at 637 Main Street.
Okay, that's fine. And then, what was the other question I was going to ask you? Shoot. Oh, do you think Half Moon Bay will, I watched the sewer district meeting recently. I'm sorry, sanitary, SAM meeting, and, Half Moon Bay refused to, put any money towards the Princeton Pump Station, and that's part of the ERF lawsuit mitigation that everybody signed the I can't think. I'm so sorry. I have a really bad toothache still.
Settlement decree.
Thank you. The consent decree or whatever settlement. And now, because the city won't plunk down any money towards it till after the lawsuit gets settled with the other two sister agencies, it sounds like we're not going to be able to get that completed in time because we can't start it without Half Moon Bay's funding. And it really sounds as though it might create a bigger lawsuit down the road from ERF. And did you want to weigh in on that and explain it to the rest of the people tuned in on the Midcoast? What's up with that? Why the city just won't help out with that?
That's one way of characterizing it. The way we would characterize it is that we want to protect our ratepayers. The lawsuit is going to be heard, and we anticipate a decision by the end of the year. That has to be done within 90 days after that.
Okay.
If the city wins, then the other agencies are going to be compelled to return the money that the city has already forwarded toward the intertie pipe system. If the city loses, then we've already paid in, and that's the end of that. So one way or the other, the decision will be made soon, probably by November, and the lawsuit is settled, and we can go about our business.
Actually, well, I listened to the SAM meeting. Maybe you didn't.
I did.
It sounded to me as if we've already used up our reserves because the city's not going to help pay for the Princeton pump station in the meantime before the lawsuit gets settled. And Keishan sounded as if they wait till the judge.
Is there a question in here for Harvey?
Yeah.
Is this a
If the
question for
judge
Harvey?
rules, if you
this is more like
talking, I'll be able to
comment?
finish my question. If the judge rules, then we won't have enough time to complete the Princeton pump station by the deadline for the ERF lawsuit. Did you hear that part?
I didn't hear a question.
Yeah, what's the question, Sid?
The question is, why can't they pay a little money in advance so we can get that project started in light of the fact that they already signed the stipulation for the ERF lawsuit, so we could complete the Princeton pump station?
If you listen to the meeting, you'll have heard that we're in favor of getting that the Princeton pump station done and paid for. Is a question of whether or not the city would agree to forward the money without a stipulation from the other agencies that if the lawsuit went against them, that we would get our money back. But we were in favor.
Point of order here. I'm going to interrupt, Harvey.
Okay.
This is an important issue. Sid is ready. Normally discuss this under council member activity, at which time I'm happy to relate what I've learned, and I'd be happy to agendize this for another meeting. It's a complicated situation, and I think banting back and forth ad hoc is not going to be the best use of time tonight. We have presenters waiting right now and other agenda items. So I will suggest I could bring this up under item 5. I'll ask the council if they want to spend time on it tonight. Otherwise, I'll be happy to have a much more detailed discussion about this, at another meeting, because it's an important issue. Sid's raising an important issue. So any other questions for Harvey?
No, I was just questioning why they want to keep kicking the can down the road when it's going to cost us more money. That's all. Thank you.
All right. So our next item, seeing no other public comment or hands raised or council questions. Our next item of business is the consent agenda. I want to thank Ann and Kimberly together with me. We have punched up the minutes for July 12th and 26th and August 16th. Does anyone want to pull any of those minutes before we vote as part of the consent agenda? Any council members? I see none. So could we vote to approve the consent agenda, Scott?
Greg,
Yes.
Ann,
Yes.
Claire,
Yes.
Kimberly,
Yes.
I'm a yes. Dan
Yes.
and Gus.
Yes.
So 7-0 to approve the consent agenda.
All right, at 7:29 and some seconds, by a masterful bit of scheduling, we are now ready to present from Fix and San Mateo some topics relating to oversight of the sheriff. Jim Lawrence, I believe I've been told you're going to start the discussion, and Nancy's been made co-host and she's going to show her slides. So go for it, Jim.
Thank you. And thank you to all for inviting us tonight. I certainly am looking forward to this. Again, my name is Jim Lawrence. I'm the board chair of Fix and San Mateo County. Fix and San Mateo County is a nonpartisan nonprofit dedicated to improving the lives of all San Mateo County residents. We believe in order to do that, the public must have a voice in shaping public policy. Our overall goal, as you can imagine, is to improve the safety and security of all residents of San Mateo County. Our mission is to persuade the Board of Supervisors to take advantage of existing state law, AB 1185, and install a civilian oversight board with an Inspector General's office with subpoena power for San Mateo County's Sheriff's Office. Now, give me a few facts and figures. Today, San Mateo County, every January, we deposit $300 million into account for the Sheriff's Office to run our safety and security throughout the county, without any transparency, without any accountability, without any reporting back as to how that money is spent. We believe there needs to be transparency and accountability for that, and oversight as to what these activities are within the Sheriff's Office. What we want to do here tonight is to give you what we call a working knowledge of a Civilian Oversight Board and Inspector General's office, and the ability to discuss it, amongst yourselves or with your neighbors. Civilian Oversight Boards, as you may or may not know, are rapidly growing throughout the country. Here in the Bay Area, San Francisco County, Santa Clara County, Sonoma County, as well as other counties are in coalition with us to get our own Civilian Oversight Board, that being Santa Cruz County, Marin, Santa Barbara, etc. Now, I'm like you. I like facts and figures when I'm looking at a topic this broad. So I'm going to turn it over to our Executive Director, Nancy Goodban, who will share with you some of the specifics of AB 1185, as well as what is a Civilian Oversight Board and Inspector General, and what are some of the benefits of having that in our governance structure here in San Mateo County. So again, thank you. I look forward to answering any and all of your questions at the end of her presentation. Thank you.
Thank you, Jim. And let me try sharing my screen. So I'm Nancy Goodban. I'm in Redwood City, and thank you so much for having us. It's great to see people that we know and meet new people. So hopefully we can see our screen. We're really honored to be here to talk a little. Jim does a great overview, and then I try to do a little bit more of the detail, and then there'll be time for questions. So it's really, the goal, as he said, is to have a community voice in public safety. It's really a community responsibility overall. And we're seeking independent review of sheriff policies and practices. That means two-way communication and dialogue between the community and the sheriff to address complaints, investigate issues and incidents, and make policy and practice recommendations. And the goal is to really support the sheriff deputies and their mission, which is to protect and serve, so that we can really have public safety for all. Very importantly, our recommendation, which we cover here, says that the oversight budget is the responsibility of the county. It should not take away from the sheriff budget. It shouldn't reduce programming or staffing for the sheriff. It's a county thing. So if my computer will let me move there. It's really just common sense, good government checks and balances. Everybody has some kind of a check and balance on them at every level. Our sheriff, who is a very strong leader, and for the first time in history, a reform-minded, very strong female sheriff that we have that's implemented a lot of programs already, can't do it by herself. We all have a part in helping it make it happen. It's fiscally responsible to have some kind of oversight over the policies and practices, and it provides transparency into what's going on and just helps with accountability. So we're part of the Coalition for a Safer San Mateo County. Fixin' San Mateo County has kind of pulled the group together. We're a nonprofit founded by local residents a couple of years ago. And we brought together 33, well, now it's probably 35 local organizations, faith communities, political clubs, nonprofit organizations, and so on. Besides that, oversight and the Fixin' San Mateo County has been endorsed by the city of Half Moon Bay unanimously. Thank you, Councilman Harvey and the others. By the city of East Palo Alto, they also voted to endorse the city of Redwood City, San Mateo City, Portola Valley, and the North Fair Oaks Community Council, which altogether represent about a third of the county residents. So there's a lot of support for it, including Representatives Eshu former Representative Spear, Mullen, Senator Becker, Assemblymember Berman, mayors and former mayors, and other elected and appointed community leaders, probably about 50. So the question is, why would we even need some kind of oversight? What's wrong? Well, the fact is people of color are at risk, and oversight has been growing in the country at large ever since really the murder of George Floyd, and people starting to recognize that there's disparities in policing. People of color are 9 times more likely in our county to be arrested than white people. And that's the Department of Justice statistics, as well as the sheriff's portal. And Hispanic people are twice as likely to be arrested. And in the 5-county Bay Area, this was a news analysis, Black people are 7% of the population, but 27% of the people killed by police. So there are risks there, but we don't know how to fix it. We don't know what causes it. We don't know how to fix it. Oversight is a way to try to drill down and get to the bottom of it and work between the sheriff and the community to reduce these risks. And I mentioned, as Jim did, civilian oversight's getting to be pretty common. Now there's 250 or more cities and counties nationally that have oversight, including some of the counties in California are, besides the ones Jim mentioned, the local ones, also Los Angeles, San Diego, Orange County, Santa Cruz just passed an ordinance earlier this spring. And it's because state law, AB 1185, has given, strengthened, and clarified the authority of the Board of Supervisors to set up a civilian oversight, including an inspector general and a board of community members. So it is getting more common, and it's getting more common because people are recognizing that police and sheriff have a lot of power over our lives, and it's important for the community to be involved with how that power is used to make sure it's used fairly. So then the question is, this is the real question. People say, what the heck are you talking about? What does community voice look like? What does oversight look like? So a common model, and the one we're recommending, and this is kind of what AB 1185 authorizes, is there be a civilian oversight board of community members like yourselves, like ourselves, but countywide, and an inspector general who is an attorney. And I'll talk more about each of those in a minute. So there's 2 parts of it, the community board and the inspector general. Both of these are appointed by the Board of Supervisors. That's in AB 1185, which also says they both have subpoena power. Our Board of Supervisors can decide whether or not they want to have subpoena power for both of those entities, but the law says they can. And importantly, then what do? They both review and recommend. They look at policies, they make public reports, and they're both in a 2-way dialogue with the sheriff. And in every place that this works, when you look at the national people and the people that work nationally, you really want to have a strong relationship between the oversight entity and the sheriff's office. This should be positive. It should be working hand in hand to help the department run more smoothly. Then the oversight board itself, I mentioned that one part is the civilian oversight board, community members like ourselves. We're recommending it be impartial. We don't want people with an axe to grind or people who are biased. They should be knowledgeable, committed, have diverse geographically. We're recommending that each Board of Supervisors member appoint two members of the board, and then the final 11th member be at large, and geographic and life experience diversity. And importantly, they meet every month in public. It's posted it will be posted on the county website. And they are mostly doing community outreach, listening, sharing feedback with the sheriff. They might hear complaints. And so they're out there in the community, meeting around the community as well as by Zoom, and hearing from the public. The important thing is that this is independent of the sheriff's office. I should say it's different than the Great Cares program that the sheriff has going. That's a group of people who are selected by the sheriff, who meet with the sheriff, who report to the sheriff. They don't meet in public. They don't do public reports. They're not meant to be. So it's really different because it's independent. It's from the outside. So that's the oversight board that we recommend. Again, the Board of Supervisors has voted that they like the idea of an oversight board, but then the details are up to them. How big it would be, how they would select people to be on it, and what that roles and responsibilities would be. But this is what we're recommending. Then, the Inspector General is the other half of it. The Inspector General is very different. That's a one individual, usually an attorney with criminal law experience. They can investigate complaints from residents. They do the confidential work. They investigate incidents, use of force, including excessive force. They investigate deaths in custody, racial profiling trends, that kind of thing. And they would do a case report. How it would really work with them is if there is a problem, and we know there have been some problems on the coast, they would look at what the sheriff reports, and then they would say, okay, the sheriff didn't really interview everyone, or the sheriff didn't really do that. So let's look a little deeper. Or they would look at the sheriff report or the district attorney report and say, oh, I get it. That makes sense. So they generally, in a lot of places, they kind of audit or monitor the reports that are already being done internally. They can take on their own investigation too if nobody else is investigating. So I know we went kind of fast on that, but imagine a group like yourself that meets in public like you do, and it's publicly noticed, and you have an agenda and you have minutes every month, and you hear from people exactly like you're doing today. I heard concerns about a couple of issues out there. This is what the civilian board would do. The Inspector General doesn't exactly hide in their office, but they do some stuff that may be confidential. They may look at data records that other people don't see, and they really try to understand the dynamics of problems and look at trends. In order to really make it work, this is based on the National Association of Civilian Oversight of Law Enforcement. In order to make it work, it needs to be independent of the sheriff. It can't be part of the sheriff's office. It would report, both of these would report to the Board of Supervisors. They wouldn't report to the sheriff. There should be strong subpoena power, but you should never need to use it. And we had a speaker just last night, the guy who started it in Sonoma County, and he said, you need the subpoena power because then when you ask for data, they'll give it to you. Before we had subpoena power, I would ask for data and I would never get it. But at the same time, you should never use the subpoena. You should have a good relationship with your sheriff's office and get the data you need to do the investigation. It's important. The third point is important to reflect the diversity of the community so that there's trust from the community. People don't feel left out. There needs to be consistent support from the Board of Supervisors for the oversight function. It needs to be funded adequately. They have to be able to take complaints directly from residents rather than having them complaints filtered through a third party, like from the sheriff's office or the, other parts of the county functioning. And they have to be able to access data and records when they need that to do their job. So those are really important, but they're not hard to do. And I think what's a really interesting piece of it is the next question is, what is this really going to do? What impact will it have? Well, it's limited. Oversight is necessary, but it's not limited. And this is really important. Oversight of a sheriff's office is meant to create transparency and accountability through public reports, shining the light on what's going on, what the policies are, making recommendations about maybe improvements in training, improvements in policies and practices. But very importantly, by law, it cannot set sheriff policy or board of super policy or budget. It can't discipline or fire anybody. It really is more of a kind of outside auditor function, if you think of it that way. And sometimes people compare it to, in every county and city, they have a if they have Parks and Rec Commission, they have a Planning Commission, they might have a, Public Works, Commissioner Board, the Arts Board or Library Board. These are boards and commissions that are set up to help the department function smoothly and make sure that things don't go wrong or get out of kilter. And if you think of it this way, it's really like very similar to having a public safety commission, which a few of our cities are already beginning to explore. It would only be for the sheriff. It wouldn't be for any of the police departments, because this would be set up by the Board of Supervisors. So they only have jurisdiction over the sheriff. And then finally, this is the last slide, just where are we now? The County Board of Supervisors has a subcommittee, Supervisors Pine and Slocum were set up a year ago, September, to look at oversight. And then a year ago, November, almost a year ago, the board voted unanimously to have them explore models that have an inspector general plus a civilian board and bring back those models. So right now the county's doing that exploration. The subcommittee is, they're doing community outreach. They're working with the county executive office on that. They're planning to do a study session at the Board of Supervisors in October, late October. The idea of that is it's a public meeting where everybody comes, including Jim will be making a 10-minute presentation there as well. And they'll come and bring forward some of the ideas, some of the options that they have, some of the models they're looking at. They'll hear from their community outreach people, which is the Gardner Center at Stanford. They'll hear from county attorney. Presumably then they'll come back with some guidance and say to the county attorney, let's develop an ordinance that hopefully encapsulates these kind of best practices, which is the inspector general and the civilian board, and vote by the end of the year. The timing can slip, of course, because anything could happen, but they're really hopeful and they've committed publicly to try to get it done by the end of the year. And then it would get implemented over the next couple of years. So one thing I know people always ask us, but what about, we have a new sheriff. I'm going to stop sharing just for a minute. We have a new sheriff. Why don't we just let her do her job? By the time this thing gets going, she will have been in office 2 or 2.5 years. So she is doing a terrific job, as you know, of trying to beef up patrols and beef up community engagement. She ran on a reform platform of transparency, integrity, and community engagement. And hopefully this can be done by the Board of Supervisors in coordination with the sheriff. Once it's set up, it has to be independent of the sheriff. But that doesn't mean the sheriff shouldn't be involved in helping understand what the needs are to keep the public safe with this model. So thank you much. And any questions, if we have time for that, we're welcome.
All right, so I have a bunch. Claire, if you don't mind, I'd like to start here. One thing I found shocking, it's hard to believe that $300 million is given to the sheriff and not reported as how the money is spent. In particular, I'll note that individual capital expenditures, let's say above $1 million each, aren't separately agreed and authorized by the county. That flabbergasts me, because there are pieces of equipment you can buy that commit you to a certain operations, maintenance, and capital replenishment cost for a decade to come. So you're essentially putting a wedge into forcing future budgets to be higher if you don't get oversight on the capital expenses. You see what I'm saying? So I'm dumbfounded by the financial management aspect of it, but I'm sure that's not.
Yeah, we should just be
not the
clear.
reason.
The county executive does pay attention. The board has rules that you have to have a contract approved if it's above a certain amount and stuff. It's not that nobody's paying any attention, but there's huge number of deputies that are vacant. That's been true for a long time, and the sheriff's really struggling with trying to recruit. There's vacancies in the jail, but there's no kind of regular oversight that's provided about this. It's more ad hoc.
Okay. All right,
Yes,
so
also
I have three. Go
I
ahead,
was
John.
just going to add that constitutionally, from the California Constitution, the sheriff, in many respects, does not report to the board of directors. The board of directors by constitution has to fund her operations. She does not report to them. She reports to the people every 4 years.
Okay, so I have 3 questions, and I don't know that you have to answer them all now, and then we'll have questions from others like Claire. One of my questions is, what's the stick or carrot that can be used with the sheriff? Is it the budget set every year? Another question is, what does the sheriff think about this? We haven't had anybody else come and speak on this issue, so we don't have any idea what other stakeholders might say. And the last question, which I would hope you would answer now, is what do you want from the MCC?
What we want from the EMC, like we asked from the other councils and organizations, is your support and endorsement of this initiative so we can make sure that the board understands that the community is behind this mission.
Yeah,
Okay,
that's exactly
so
true.
got
I
it.
think,
So
yeah,
now
I think
I'd
with
like to,
this, oh yeah, the other questions too.
yeah, I'd like to go to Claire. She had raised her hands with a question. Can I hear from the other council members first?
Yeah, I'm not the only one. I have a lot of questions. I'm gonna confine my questions to questions about fixing San Mateo itself. And then come back to others after other people have had a chance to ask things. What does Fix in San Mateo do as an organization besides advocate for this initiative?
This is our single mission.
That you're not doing anything else?
We're not doing anything else, no.
Okay,
We don't do candidates, we don't do housing. Mm-mm.
okay. If it's sort of an adversarial kind of title, unfortunately, it sounds as though you're saying somebody's doing something wrong and we're going to fix it. That's unfortunate, but if this is all you're doing, that explains exactly what your role is, I guess. Is there another group or another model for sheriff's oversight that's also in the consideration by the Board of Supervisors, potentially?
There were 3 considered at the last November meeting, which was a study session. David Silverman of the county attorney's office presented 3 models, and they voted to support this particular one. One of the models, they just have a civilian advisory commission, no inspector general function, no auditor function. And one, they would just kind of have the auditor without a civilian board. And the other is that they would have both. And at that time, the supervisor said we should have both.
So
And
at this point, this
okay,
is the only program that's under consideration?
No, they've been spending the last 8 months or 9 months figuring out what model might make sense.
So
it wasn't like a binding vote that you have to create an ordinance like that. They say, go explore it and come back and report to us.
Okay, thank you. I'm going to throw in one more really quick, and that is the idea of an inspector general who looks as though would be a county employee. Are there other inspector generals in the county setup? Is there one for the county overall? Is there one for different other aspects of county government, or would this be a brand new thing?
Well,
I don't
think
I don't
so.
think so. And it could be a county employee. For instance, that's what San Francisco has, that's what Los Angeles, Sonoma County has. It could be a contractor. It could be a county employee who's under contract, like a 3-year contract. They're not going to get vested for retirement, or it could just be a contract. So Santa Clara County, they contract with a group which does auditing and around many cities and counties in the state. So the Board of Supervisors can decide if they want to hire a person, contract with a person, or set up a contract for X amount of dollars for someone to do the inspection.
Okay, but they would be paying for them. But
Yeah.
there is nobody in the county government right now that oversees, like, where's the money going? Are there big problems going on that we should address?
That is correct.
But that's interesting. Okay, I'll
Well,
stop.
There's not an inspector general, but the county pays close attention. I mean,
Right.
Robert Manchia is really smart, and he's the finance officer. So they pay close attention, and they force all the department heads to to call in, but I think the other, back to kind of getting back to that other question that you had asked, Greg, one of the stick and carrot, the Board of Supervisors has budget authority over the sheriff. They can say, for instance, they can say what they did. You cannot spend money to cooperate with ICE immigration. You cannot use county staff to do that because it's county money and we control the money. But the Board of Supervisors cannot say to the sheriff, you cannot cooperate with ICE. Do you see the difference? You can't tell them what to do, but you can tell them not to use money to do it, which means they really can't do it.
Yeah.
And that's their budget authority.
Right now, I'm running the meeting temporarily, so I think what I'll do is just go around the table and Gus, would you like to start? Well,
I don't mind. She's gonna do it this way.
Hi, thanks for the presentation. I just want to preface my comments by saying I grew up in inner city St. Louis in a very low income, heavily minority area. The police largely stayed out of our neighborhood, and we lacked any means of having a dialogue with law enforcement. And so I am broadly supportive of there being some kind of mechanism for
That's Lynn.
some kind of mechanism for the community and law enforcement to have a dialogue outside of the media, which is what ends up happening if there isn't a mechanism, and the media is extraordinarily poor choice of venue to have a dialogue with law enforcement. That said, I do have some concerns about this particular model. To Claire's point, I mean, other models include that the inspector general and the civilian board be advisory to the Board of Supervisors, which already has subpoena power over the sheriff's department. I have to say, I am generally not supportive of the idea of giving a bunch of civilians subpoena power over the sheriff. I think that's far too adversarial and puts too much power in the hands of people who are not properly educated in how to use it. That's one point. Second point, you mentioned making sure that that this would be properly funded. Is there a draft budget or something we can look at that gives us some insight into what properly funded looks like for this organization?
We do have a draft ordinance that's on our website, and it calls for what Sonoma County does, which is the funding would be 1% of the amount of the sheriff's budget, but not to come out of the sheriff's budget. So that would be about $3 million a year. In Sonoma County, I think it might be about $2 million a year because they're a little smaller than us. But that's, you know, up to the supervisors, because that would pay for a inspector general. It would pay for the county attorney time, not a new staff, but the county attorney if they have to do work on it. It would pay for county executive staff if they have to staff meetings and so forth. It would pay for some of the, you know, offset some of the costs of existing county staff to do the work. But generally, we also recommended, which the Board of Supervisors may not go with, but some counties have, a stipend for the people who are on that commission, so that it would include people even if they have the kind of job that they can't take off without losing money.
Let me kind of add a
That's
little
up to, yeah.
add a little bit more context to the financial side of it. You know, the 1%, it will be, we're asking for 1% equal of the sheriff's budget, as Nancy said, not from the sheriff's budget. And put in perspective, the county just spent $5.6 million on one lawsuit as a result of law enforcement activities that happened. And there was a civil suit. And there's many more like that. So from a financial standpoint, this will be a win-win for the county.
Or it could be the opposite. Yes, you'll identify more problems and then get sued even more. So
what they found is quite the opposite. Is, I mean, Bob Johnson, who's now the sheriff in Santa Clara County, when he was PD of Palo Alto, he talked to us and he said, you know, the guys on the street didn't like it at first when someone came in and told them their report was bad. Some civilian is complaining because they were pulled over. The report was really sloppy. The city gets sued and has to pay out. He said now they've learned that they have to write better reports, and the lawsuits have been reduced as a result of that. So he really found it reduced liability. Can I say something just too on the subpoena power? And because you had asked what the sheriff thinks, I think in general what the sheriff has said is she wants the time to get her programs going, which is why this wouldn't even happen for another year and a half. And she's also said on some occasions, I think, that she's not comfortable with having the civilian board have subpoena power, but seems to be more comfortable with the inspector general having subpoena power. And I don't want to put words into her mouth of what she thinks right now, but I think that's probably, she may still think that. Yeah.
Thank you. Anne, you had some comments or questions?
Yes, my first one was the budget, what your budget would be, so you answered that. And then I'm just concerned about the vacancies and the recruitment issues that the sheriff's department has. I don't want to see this make it worse. So that would be my concern. And also just the fact that I think it's one of the hardest jobs even imaginable. I can't imagine every day waking up knowing someone could be shooting at me, is going to be, you know, looking at me in a negative way instead of positive. I think it's far more, I think there's time for us to look at police officers positively, and they make a huge difference in our lives. I mean, they risk their life for us. And I just feel that we should do whatever we can to help them be the best officers they can be. And I look at this more of maybe mental health support for them, you know, because a lot of the things that happen here comes from, I think, just being inundated day in and day out with crime, and then seeing the same criminals back out every day and just getting frustrated and acting in ways that perhaps don't go along with the badge. And that's not everybody. This is a few people who do this. And so I feel like I would like to see, and I don't know if your board would do this, but try to work on ways to help the sheriff's office. How can you have a better relationship with the community, and how can overall we, improve communication and just really help the officers.
That's the whole idea. Yeah, because we met with the head of the Deputy Sheriff's Union Association a few weeks ago, and I asked him, what are the main concerns you have? What are the hardest things about the job? And they have people at the jail that work 20 hours and then sleep 4 hours. It's a very, very hard job. And so that's why we were saying to them, let's talk about how this oversight could help the sheriff meet some of the policy goals that the office has. So, for instance, at her budget hearing, they said they wanted to expand the Half Moon Bay CARES program for people with mental health crises to North Fair Oaks and the rest of the county. So that's the role of oversight board, could get together, hear that proposal, and decide, does that make sense? And, ask the board of supervisors to implement it and fund it. So it can be a way to really support exactly what you're saying, the mental health needs, which is one of the new sheriff's big priorities, meeting the mental health needs of the officers. Yeah.
Let me also add just quickly here, from a checks and balances standpoint. Think of the president, think of the governor. They have checks and balances, the Congress, the Senate, the Supreme Court. Likewise with Newsom. I was formerly the mayor of Foster City. Our police chief reported not only to the city manager, but to the city council. Currently, the sheriff doesn't have any checks and balances. We're not saying she's doing anything wrong. We walk the streets to get her elected. I'm absolutely happy she got elected. But every elected body needs checks and balances. And the public must have a voice, because this is a democratic society. Without the public having a voice in shaping public safety, we're going to have the same thing over and over. So I hear you, but I don't buy the argument this is going to hurt recruiting. Because if you look at the records all the way back 5 years, 2016, 2017, these openings were there. These openings are all around the county. It's really a housing and a cost of living issue. It's not an oversight issue.
Yeah. And they've got oversight in all the other local counties now too. So it's happening. It's the trend. We want to do it right because we have a good sheriff who's reform minded. This is the time to do it. Get, like you said, support the deputies, support the sheriff, get them on board in a way that this works for them, that the oversight can be positive.
We have a few more questions, I think. Kimberly?
Thank you, Jim and Nancy. I really appreciate the presentation and the conversation. And my questions actually have been answered from Gus and Ann.
So,
Yes,
can I go now? All right.
please.
Okay. How many people you say this is going to entail? Like you said, 11 people from the community plus an attorney general and then another few people, right?
Yeah, the 11 people from the community are volunteers.
Okay.
Right. There'd be people like this council.
Okay.
Maybe not the same size.
So I was just trying to do the math for a second. So I did 14 people divided by 3 million, and that's $214,000 per person per year. Is that what you're asking for?
No. And
where's $3 million going?
Yeah, what we're talking about was probably along the lines of an inspector general, and it would probably be a high-level county attorney position with benefits, and probably a management analyst.
That's full-time? They're going to be a full-time person.
That's what they have in Sonoma, which is smaller than us, and they have a couple of support staff. Yeah.
Okay, so who else is going to get paid out of the $3 million besides that person?
Well, you have to remember that the inspector general will actually have to bring in additional technical resources, so that you can't say that he's going to do all the work. We're talking one person, probably a small staff, 3 or 4 people at maximum. But if he's doing an investigation, he needs outside support, and he brings in the county. This has to come out of his budget.
Okay. So when I do the math, it seems very expensive, and I would really like to be and have one of those positions. It sounds like a really good job to me, right?
But to what Jim, just to be clear on what Jim was saying, and the Board of Supervisors hasn't asked us for a breakdown or anything. We just did kind of an internal one. But honestly speaking, somebody's going to have to do some work scheduling meetings and stuff. The way the county budget works, because I used to do it at Santa Clara Social Services, they don't do anything for free. If you want to call the county attorney and talk to them,
the volunteers though, right? Except for the volunteers.
The volunteers do it for free, but they would get a stipend and reimbursement for for transportation, parking and stuff. But so part of it would be defraying the costs of some of the county staff that are already there. But probably there would be a management analyst type person, paralegal type person, and a administrative support person. And then other funds would be for training and for, like Jim said, if you need outside resources.
Okay, I have one other question too, and I think this has been slightly brought up. Is your motivation for this organization preemptive, or have you already identified a problem that you're pursuing? So what motivated you to have this? Like, are you just being on the safe side, or do you already see a problem you've identified?
Yes. If you look at statistics by the Post, which is a California state organization, the racial component in San Mateo County versus the arrests and stops is completely out of balance. Completely out of balance. If you look at the sheriff's actual statistics, if you look at the sheriff's office today, and just take the county jail, there's 1,000 inmates. 90% are people of color.
Okay. All right.
It's systemic. It's not just our county, but we need to recognize our county is a microcosm in the whole country. This is true in every city, in every county, in every state.
Dan, did you have a question?
I don't have any questions. Thank you, Nancy and Jim. I will say that I do believe it would be healthy to have communication dialogue between the community and the sheriff. I think that with eventually that it can work very well for everyone. It should. you know, yeah, I think the community should be able to at least make suggestions on policy and such, give feedback. So I'll leave it at that. Thank you for your work.
Thank you for the time.
Greg,
Are you asking me, Claire?
I'm turning it back to you.
Okay, thanks. Well, I also appreciate your initiative on this. I think nationally we see policing as a major issue. And that's all I'll say for now. So good. I want to take public comment. I see we have a question from Sid, and we'll look for other hands, and then we'll come back and discuss what we're going to do. Sid?
Yes, thank you. I'm very interested in this, and I didn't really, it's good that you came and explained it further, because I do hear you guys at the Board of Supervisors when they give you 2 minutes or something to talk. And of course, this is much more in depth, and I definitely feel your need for this sort of thing. And I haven't been sure why the pushback or the glacial slow walking of it, but except that that's how county government works. But I do know that when we we lost 3 co-siders over the years due to the sheriffs. One was a Pacifica resident, Chinadu Okobi, who was tased to death on the El Camino Real in Millbrae. Then Yanira Serrano and Sandra Harmon, both in Half Moon Bay, were shot when somebody called 911 and the sheriff showed up guns ablazing, without really asking many questions. Sandra Harmon was white, but the other 2 were people of color. So I just think, it can't hurt to have oversight. And one question that I wanted to ask you was, do you think that they're slow walking it because you want subpoena power? Is that like a turn off to some of these people that hear you guys in chambers begging for this? I was just curious. Can you hear?
Yeah.
I can hear you.
Oh, okay. Well, you were shaking your head, but I didn't hear a comment. You don't think that that's one of their issues?
I don't think so. I don't think they made up their mind relative to oversight.
Okay.
My conversation with the supervisor that, let the facts fall where they may, and then we'll make a decision.
That's true. And I mean, there's plenty of cases. I don't know if you would have been involved in that Broadmoor police chief guy, but there's a lot of, iffy stuff.
Yeah.
So I look for you to be the public watchdogs for those kind of things.
And this would just, thank you. This would just be the sheriff, not the Broadmoor. Yeah.
Well, I know, but I'm just saying that it's law enforcement in general. So it's not that people are all clean everywhere just because they're in law enforcement.
Yeah. And I don't think the county's intentionally, I agree with Jim, they're not intentionally slow walking it. It's just been a tough year, as you know.
Yeah. We've had plenty of stuff going on here on the coast side. Thank you.
I know.
Glad you came to talk to us.
I don't see any other public questions. So I'm going to thank you both for your time. And we will be back to you as needed when we discuss future agendas and letters that we might write and so forth. So thanks again.
Thank you so
the
much.
council.
And if you
Thanks.
do choose to endorse and we put you on the website, we would be just totally honored. And if you have more questions, that's great too.
All right. Thanks very much. I know how to get a hold of both of you.
Thanks for your time.
To the council, I would say, let's discuss this under future agendas later today. And one of the things we will need to advance this is a couple of council members. So, apologies. And with that, we turn to the next agenda item, which is the Cypress Point EIR. Give me a second here. If I could just overview the process that I think we're following. We have to submit written comments by September 25th. We've produced what is an over 40-page document that contains a lot of research notes and some narrative and some thoughts on assignments and process. And I will bring that up and share my screen, I guess, in a moment. What I'm proposing here today for process is that we ask the council first if they have questions and concerns about the draft we've prepared so far. Then we'll ask for public comment. And then we'll return to the council and ask for direction on going forward with producing final deliverables. We had previously discussed that in order to meet the September 25th date for comment, we're going to have to hold a special meeting next week on September 20th, at which time we would review hopefully a final version of a letter and or a report or both. So that's where we are. Let me see if I can bring up that document and share my screen. Do you see me scrolling through a document here?
Yep.
Okay. So here's where we are. We've got sections assigned. I've received some material from everybody. We haven't gotten complete submissions from everybody, one person, but we have at least draft thoughts, and we have a ton of comments. We have comments on every section. And I think with a little bit of work, for instance, we could write a good narrative on the aesthetics. With a little bit of work, we could write a little broader statement on the air quality and so forth and so on. Biological resources in good shape, good shape in the sense that I think we've gathered a fair amount of facts. Geology and soils, my thought was we've got a lot of concerns, and we could write that up. That section will take some serious authoring. I believe that's my section. And I want to apologize. I've had some health problems. No, that's Ann, but you know, I'm always happy to help edit everything. I've talked to a number of geologists, by the way, about this. What's the next session down? Greenhouse gases and the climate emission. I think we're in good shape there. We're close to having a narrative, but again, it'll take rewriting. Hazardous and hazardous materials. We have a ton of information. It's going to take some serious writing. Wildfire, one of the sections I expected to write on. That's going to have to be rewritten. Hydrology and water quality, a lot of work needs to be done there. The main problem would seem to be concerns about the stormwater runoff been raised by residents, that we already have 11 acres acting as kind of a retention basin. And if we take away 150,000 square feet of that, it's not going to work. They may be able to cope with their own runoff on their own lot, but they're inheriting a runoff of significance. And we're not clear that the methods they use for dealing with stormwater are adequate. And it runs into Fitzgerald Marine Reserve. Where else are we here? So there's a lot of work to be written on that. I don't know what we have on land use planning.
Greg, to the runoff point, I'd like to just suggest asking them to use pervious material instead of impervious. I
Okay,
can't.
Sid,
You're
hold your
scrolling way
comments.
too fast.
I know
gonna,
I am. I'm scrolling.
Okay.
I'm scrolling just to review where we are.
Is this document on the website? Because I'm going to probably
Yes,
off.
It's posted on the website.
Okay, thanks.
Noise, we have some comments. Transportation needs a lot of work. I think we have major concerns in that area. It needs to be completely rewritten, but we have pages of material. Utilities, I need to rewrite and expand. I have concerns about the sewer system and the water supply. Wildfire, we have some good comments. I believe we need to expand this from wildfire to also include, what do you want to call it, normal fires, and the water supply questions about that. And then we have a section on alternatives, which we were going to comment on what else they could be doing. And then I had an idea that we might want to speak to accountability. And by coincidence, if you went to the meeting today, there was a fellow speaking about these kinds of things. Who's accountable for what? And then in terms of a final deliverable, I had the thought that maybe we want a short section based on all the research done in the previous sections that would say, we want the following things to be studied or mitigations to be performed either before you approve this project or before you start construction, just to make it pointed what we're asking for. And then acting on advice we've received from several other people who've dealt with EIRs, we've been advised that everything should be turned into a question so that they have to answer it. Anne has spent hours putting together pages of questions here. Obviously, we will update this as we rewrite the other sections, but we're going to have a list of these questions indexed to the page numbers and sections of the EIR and asking them, you know, what are you doing about this, etc. Every concern we have should be turned into a question. All right, so that's just an overview of where we are on the document. Now, I would have done a lot more work had my health not intervened. The good news is my wife left town last night for a few weeks, so I have less wife but more dog, and I should have time to do some writing in the coming week or so and try and get back on track. But we only have a week to punch this together. So I guess what I want to do is go around the table and hear from the council thoughts on either the process or concerns, to be sure, for example, that we've raised a concern you might have. And then we'll ask for public comment. So who wants to start going around the council? Do I just pick an end of the table?
I just have one question. I just have one question, Greg. Did you mention in there the fact that since this is 75 units, right?
71.
71.
Okay.
1 units, including the manager, I believe.
And so our growth is 40 a year of water hookups? Isn't that what we?
40 of building permits.
40.
And this will take up 1 whole year's worth of building permits, and it will take up most of the next year. So this is all that will be able to be built here.
Okay, so that would limit us to 0 growth for the next 2
Yes.
years. Has anybody who's a contractor complained about this?
Not yet.
Okay, because if I was one and I had plans and approvals to do these things.
But they don't have plans and approvals. If they have plans and approvals, they're good,
Okay,
but
but
they can't get new ones.
okay, so if they owned property and then they said, you know, in 2024, I feel like building something here, I should be able to, there's going to be 0, right?
Well, keep in
I don't know
mind,
when.
keep in mind, we have a big wave project with, depending on which version of their plan you look at, 20 to 50 units. We have was it an 8 or 16 unit thing in Moss Beach that we're talking about expanding? And then we have a hotel coming up in Montero, which I assume counts as units, but I don't know, another
No,
20.
it's not residential.
Oh, it doesn't count?
It doesn't count. And I think Big Wave may not count either.
Okay.
I just wonder about that conflict.
Yes.
All those conflicts. This is part of this big conflict. And I'm just surprised there hasn't been, like, contractors are not complaining about this.
Well, I'm sure there
Are
will.
you suggesting we should put something in this report commenting about that? This is the environmental
Yes.
impact report. I
Yes.
don't know.
Or what would you say?
Okay.
I don't know, but it seems like, if I was a builder, you're saying you're taking away my potential for growth all in one,
You're delaying it
delaying my potential. For
because there is a limit to how much
Yes.
growth we can have. Now, there's the thing that I said, just sent out about the law that just passed, or the bill that just passed in the
Yes.
Senate.
Yeah,
We don't think that overrides the 40-unit cap, but it might. So
Okay.
there's some uncertainty.
okay. That was the one thing that I just wanted to make sure that it's out in the open.
Other council members?
Well, I think the most telling thing for me was actually the end of the report, which a lot of people don't really go to first. But it talked about the alternatives. And one of the alternatives was to go down to 30 units. And it said that they concluded that that number would not significantly improve the shortcomings of the overall development. So, yeah, so they said it doesn't even matter if you half the size, essentially, that the traffic issues, the pedestrian safety issues, it'll remain because it's already there. And basically this hinges on Connect to Coastside. And that's why they're focusing so much on Connect to Coastside right now. And they're basically going with 3 signals. It's what they're looking at, Cypress, California, 16th Street. And that's kind of where they're focusing all of their efforts to basically say, well, that'll mitigate it. But of course, there's no funding and there's issues, that will have to be looked at. We've discussed environmental issues. So they're just in the study phase. So they're really pushing, Cypress Point is really pushing this, even though none of these things have been mitigated. And so if you look at the alternatives that they give, I think that's a good place to kind of start to say, hey, these are the real shortcomings that haven't been answered. And what I was thinking, and I have put in there, was no one addressed or even asked the fire station, how will this affect response times? No one has answered me. They have not even, to my knowledge, and I look in the EIR, there's not one place where they even consulted with the fire company. So that's up in the air. They also never looked at other types of housing, like senior housing, which I've been pushing from day one. They've never even looked at that as an alternative, and they still haven't put that in as one of the 4 alternatives. The 4 alternatives are do nothing. The second one was to build at the south end of Moss Beach, which is also designated for affordable housing. The third is to go to El Granada. And there's a place that's just down that way, I think, is the plot of land owned by the Cabrillo School District. I think that was 3, and I'm trying to remember, and I guess 4 is
Do
half
nothing or
the
go to
30.
Half Moon Bay. There was do nothing, and I think there was a go to Half Moon Bay.
Was there a go to no, I don't think there's nothing about Half Moon Bay. I think it's the 30 units.
Okay.
My apologies.
Granada.
It was the
It was
30
El
units,
Granada.
right? Go down to 30 units. It was do nothing. The south end of Moss Beach, El Granada, or 30 units. And so that was the 4 alternatives they came up with, but they never looked at senior housing, which to me would make the most sense for that site, because we sorely lack any kind of assisted living. There's no senior community, and Seton Hospital is basically used as a nursing home. And so, I mean, it just fits. And the biggest issue is traffic. I mean, we're talking about 359 adults are allowed to live in there. Now, they accounted for much lower numbers, but that's what's allowed. And if you look at Moon Ridge, you look at these other places, they're maxed out. And they're allowed to. So, I mean, I think to suggest that people would not have roommates and all, it just simply isn't true. And the other problem is not all of the units are for local folks. So we're talking about vehicle miles traveled. I mean, we're talking about people over the hill. We're talking, various places that people go, and the number of cars that they were even just looking at in their review of how many are going to be going at any one time was grossly undercounted. Same thing with parking spaces, grossly undercounted. Now, if all of those people start parking out in the community, the surrounding community, there's no way the fire trucks are going to be able to maneuver around this. And it really presents all kinds of issues for evacuation, like I said, and also the fire company, a vast majority of their calls are medical. And as you know, time is of the essence. When it comes to heart attack, stroke, every minute counts. So this is serious, and they have not looked at it at all. Kelmore Street, the street I live on, hasn't even been evaluated. And we sit right there. The fire company is on Stetson, but it branches between Kelmore and Stetson, and no one even evaluated Kelmore Street at all. And it's just as heavily traveled as Stetson. And so, and then
So point of information, Ann, can I just mention?
yeah,
I wrote Gary Burke and several people at CAL FIRE back on August 19th, and then hadn't got an answer. So I wrote again this morning, I think it was. And I got an answer from Patrick Griffin, who was not one of the people I wrote. And what he said was, apologies for the delayed response. Similar to other new developments, the fire district will enforce the district's fire code, which includes water and access, ingress, egress requirements. One sentence. Now, I had asked a bunch of questions about, did you look into the transportation? Had you studied the EIR? Had you looked at the amount of water available? And all I got was a one sentence reply. So I don't even know what process.
water question, I guess that sort of answers a water question, but it doesn't answer response times. No one has looked at response times, how that would be affected, and no one's answering that question. I mean, you know, egress and whatever they're talking about, that has nothing to do with response times and how that would be negatively impacted. Because, I mean, to say that you can get in and out of the fire station, great, but you have to get down the street. This is inside of a neighborhood. And no one seems to be telling me.
Let's not belabor it, but we do have notes in here that register your concern, right, about response time. That's one of the things we will be writing about. Do we have other council member comments or questions about this? I can't see. Zoom back out. Kimberly,
Well, I think, Dan, you had a question first, right?
I couldn't see. I can only see what the camera shows me.
You want to go ahead?
Yeah, go ahead, Dan.
You want me to go? Who's
Yeah,
going
go,
first?
Dan. You are, Dan. Kimberly deferred to you.
So you've already acknowledged that there's some more work to be done to this document. It is long, and I noticed some things that, you know, maybe even in my section maybe shouldn't be there. I think that a little bit more shorter to the point. I haven't read every word of the document, but in some areas, you know, the language seems like it could be more succinct. That's all. That's my comment.
Can we go back to Kimberly? Camera?
Okay, so two things occur to me. This is a draft EIR. The draft EIR comes before the final EIR. So the draft, there's a distinction there, right? And there's a particular way that you have to respond, which we know. So a lot of the things that we've brought forward are going to have to be crystallized into, as Dan mentioned, a more succinct format. I don't want us to confuse the EIR, draft EIR process with the comments that we want to make, right? Because that's two separate processes. And I'm a little worried that with the design review meeting coming up and the planning commission meeting that I think was this morning, that was more the opportunity, I think, to express a point of view and bring up a lot of the things that we're concerned about versus the kind of comments that can go in a draft EIR. It's unfortunate that the timeline doesn't really allow us to do that, to respond in that way to both those opportunities. But I think we should keep in mind that, you know, there's a clear process and reason for the draft EIR or focus, and then separately, all the comments that we want to make should come out in the other venues. And I don't think we can mix. I mean, certainly we can present in the summary at the top, our viewpoint and some of the things that we want to raise as comments, but we really have to crystallize in this for the body of this, very succinct observations and questions, as you pointed out. It's just two different functions.
I was gonna say, that is one of the reasons why I had the list of questions. I actually went through every single section that people had commented on and tried to pull the questions that were there.
Yeah.
So I think fine tuning that is really helpful, because what we could do is to say, when you get those questions kind of fine tuned, you say, these are our questions. And then the body says, this is our research and where it comes from, of
Right.
why we have these questions. So I think if we could just kind of take the comments, the 42 pages, like you say, make it, polish it, and then focus on those questions as well. So then that way they can reference, well, where did this question come from? And then they can see our data, where we got it from.
Yeah.
And I think that would be very helpful.
I guess I'm
Because
suggesting two different
a lot of
documents.
their maps, a lot of their methodologies are out of date. They didn't even bother to use the latest things, and I don't know
Right.
why.
And that's a
Well,
good
that's
example. So you can raise that issue by raising it as a question. But
And
that
that's what I did.
observation,
That's what I did with all of those questions. If you see
Right.
there's multiple pages of them.
but just raising, oh, this is out of date, we see this is out of date, that's not going to have any impact
Well, it
on.
does, because they didn't identify the liquefaction zones in earthquakes, for example, and so that does make a big difference. And fire hazard zones.
Those are
a lot of
important.
things that if you use outdated materials, the other thing is they said, like with El Granada, they said it's not for sale. We last talked to them in 2017. So okay, fine, but what about now?
I agree with you. It's important. What I'm trying to point out, and I'm not doing it very well, is that there are two different purposes for these documents. And so what we would theoretically create is our response to the DEIR, and then a separate, maybe summary or overview that we send to the county that talks about all these.
Well, no,
these
it is
things.
one and the same, because what happens is with the DEIR, you have to ask these questions, you have to go through planning, because what's going to happen is, let me see, it's something at the end,
Right.
I've been at meetings all morning, so I'm sorry, my mind is not there.
I read through the whole
but
thing.
But that they have, so the Board of Supervisors has to sign off on base, because the whole thing doesn't fit with CEQA. It doesn't meet the requirements. The VMT does not meet the requirements, and therefore the Board of Supervisors will have to basically allow them to go through with this, even though they don't meet the threshold. So you have to ask the questions, you have to do this to everybody. You can't just do separate. Everybody needs to be kind of included, and it starts with this, because once the EIR is finalized, that's it.
I'm only suggesting sectioning it out, right? Because
Well, we have it in sections. I mean, every section answers a section.
I'm not
question
getting
of
my
the
point
EIR.
across.
I'm not.
Yeah, Kimberly, can you repeat, you're pointing to a dichotomy. I must have read 1,000 pages of stuff, and I missed the point you're making, that we should keep our narrative research
Essentially-
separate from.
Exactly. Essentially, that's what I'm saying. You don't need a big, long narrative to respond to the draft EIR. That's exactly what they won't pay attention to. Essentially, you can prepare a narrative, but you want the most of the response to the draft EIR to be in a different format. So, for instance, there was I read all the letters that the community sent to us, and I don't know if everyone else had a chance to read those, but there was one that was very true to the kind of form that I'm thinking of. And it basically just took it section by section. And you have to think of it as the burden of proof is on you to say why this doesn't work and what is the question you have, to ask the county to answer. So a big narrative, like if we take aesthetics and we put, 5 paragraphs that's a narrative, that's not going to be helpful. I would stick with, 1 to 2 paragraphs of here's our observation, here are our questions to be answered, and this is why or whatever. But
that's why I wanted to really separate the questions out.
But the
Complete-
narrative part needs to be.
Well, yes.
There's a
And
bigger
there-
narrative here that we're
questions
talking
within the
about.
narrative, but I would like to also see the questions so that they can go point by point and go through each one. Because I think that's important, and otherwise, like you said, it may get lost in the narrative. They might not answer.
All right, so Kimberly, let Kimberly finish what she was saying there, okay?
It's a process issue.
Well, I'm just concerned because so far, Greg and I.
And please, Ann, let Kimberly.
No,
Kimberly
it's okay.
chime in.
I don't
just
think
don't
I'm
wanna get
gonna.
Stuck doing all the rest of the work.
I don't think I'm being very helpful here. So
I think you are being helpful. Because we really do need to make our response in a form that they're gonna read and is gonna make sense to somebody. So anything you can offer would be helpful.
Yeah, I agree. I think your message is helpful, Kimberly.
okay.
Are you suggesting, Kimberly, 2 paragraphs and then the questions for each section, something like that?
I think just to keep it very succinct and to the point, and have a separate narrative for all and it articulates all of this beautifully. And I think that articulation of the issues is a separate narrative that doesn't belong in the individual sections. So you would separate it out and you can send them both together, but that makes it easier for them to consider within the draft EIR process, how they expect people to respond to that. So for instance, a lot of the community responses were just narrative in nature. They didn't really ask questions. They gave a point of view. And for the draft EIR, they're not looking for a point of view.
Right, and that's why I had those list of questions, and I actually did include multiple things that came from the letters that people had sent in. I literally went over everything, the entire document, letters that came in, comments that had gone through the documents as each person submitted. And I have to say, though, that a lot of people didn't submit things. We didn't get a lot and we got very little. So most of the work was done, Dan did his section, but, it ended up being basically Greg and we did this entire thing. And so, I hear what you're saying and I understand if you look at the questions, they come from the narrative.
Right.
So that's why, perhaps you should go, if you have time to look at the questions, you can see
I
where
do.
you think it would fit. But
Claire, did you want to? Okay, thank you, Kimberly. Thank you, Ann. I want to have time to hear. I want to hear from Claire and Gus if they have things to say.
I'm just disturbed here because I'm sitting between the two people who have opinions or at least some, and I don't think this is a question of who did a lot of work and who didn't. I think it's a question of, it's wonderful that you did a lot of work. It's great. And it's a lot of material and a lot of this is very useful. I don't know what the right format is. If you know what the right format is, I think that's really important and it doesn't negate how much work you did, Ann. So I wish we could come to an agreement. on
Let me
how-
ask this of Kimberly. Let me ask this of Kimberly or anybody in the audience. Do you have an example from some other EIR, whether it's Surfrider or Green Foothills, Sierra Club, somebody who sent in comments that are in the format we should use as a template?
That's probably easy to find. I mean, there's plenty of EIRs.
Is there an attorney we can consult with?
I mean, you
Is
can
there-
probably just.
Can we consult our attorney,
We have a week. No.
Okay.
We have
No.
if somebody can find a template, we can build on the questions that Ann's listed and write a cover letter. And then that leaves me or whoever wants to join me and Ann in building the narrative and rewriting it and so forth. But that means if we don't get that done in time, at least by the next meeting, we'll have the few questions that Dan was raising in his section and so forth in a much shorter document.
So can you provide a
So-
couple of templates that they
Yeah.
can use?
Yeah,
Great.
I think it's pretty easy.
I know exactly what you're talking about. It's a business executive type. So I just want to throw this anecdote out there in support of Kimberly. One time I was doing my thing at work and I had to report to an executive and I wrote this big passage, this big narrative that was beautiful, just like how you're describing. And someone said, no, they'll never look at that. You need bullet points. They'll read the bullet points and they'll respond to those. But if you fog them with data, then it gets lost. So you're looking for deliver an executive type of.
It's an
Thing.
agency requirement. That's what it is.
Okay.
It's an agency requirement. So, it's not what I'm
All right.
looking for, an agency's looking for.
Yeah.
Gus, did you want to comment on this process or this document?
Yeah, well, first of all, I know I owe you some more transportation stuff, but I mean, can we distill out the questions by section and then just have an appendix, which is the narrative, and then we can just reference.
She did that. Ann did that. That is what Ann did.
Okay, great. Awesome.
All right. Well, then I think we should take comments from the public and listen to what they have to say about process or facts. Burnett has his hand raised, and then we'll come back to the council. So I'm opening it up for public comment. To Burnett, you have your hand raised.
Yeah, okay. I just couldn't say, if anytime you've read a long report, you always end up reading the executive summary first. I think that's the point that I think you want to do, is you want the executive summary to be your observations with your questions. And then you can have the narrative later in the document so that when they want to see support for those questions or want more detail, you go to the body of the report. I think you're faced with that anytime you have a large report. It's just that you don't usually get some person to read it cover to cover. They read the executive summary, get the high points, get the questions you want answered. And then if they want to go down and get into it in more detail, they can go down into the discussion. So that's the way I'm seeing it in the way it's being discussed here, is you want to not necessarily call it an executive summary, but keep it in that fashion. Put in the executive summary, the actual minimum that you need to actually get your point across, have your questions in there, and then have your longer discussion in the body of the report. Thanks.
Okay. Other members of the public wishing to comment? I'm trying to see. I don't see any other hands. All right. Well, that surprises me, but I'm closing public comment. So now let's have the council give direction here. We have a work group that so far was Ann and Gus and I, and I'm happy to keep staying on the work group. Ann, are you?
Yes.
Okay. So my question is somebody else, I know Kimberly, you have a lot on your plate with the wildfire management thing coming up at the next meeting. Claire, are you interested in writing the cover letter or doing something on this?
What I'm most interested in is getting this in the right format. So, and since Kimberly's the one who knows what the right format is, I would hesitate to say you should be the one to step onto this, but is there a way to get your knowledge into this without you having to do a lot of work?
I'm happy to help as much as I can, but I don't know how much I can. So
Yeah, I think we should just ask Kimberly to supply us with an example that somebody else has submitted that's approximately in the right format. And if she can just send that to me and Ann and whoever the third member of this group is going to be, we can copy that.
okay. And now one other
Right.
question. For this design review meeting at the supervisor's office on this topic, should we have something prepared for that meeting?
No.
No, the last time we went, it's basically the aesthetics. It's the color of the building, the height, whatever it is.
Yeah, beyond that, the MCC and the CDRC are separate entities and we don't cross paths.
Okay, got it.
It's more informational for us. And if you make a comment, usually privately, a private citizen, not as from the MCC.
Okay.
And when is that meeting again?
It's tomorrow on 30.
Okay, Gus, did you have any bandwidth here? I mean, I don't want to ask you to do things that, you're overloaded on.
This week is a better week. I'll work on it this week.
Well, but the question is what though? Are you going to contribute to the transportation section or what?
Yeah, I can definitely do that. And if you want help with tidying this thing up, I can help with that.
Well, I will need help. The question, Claire, are you interested in tidying it up or you want to defer to Gus?
I would defer to Gus
I
as
need-
long as he's willing to do it. Sure.
All right. All right. Well, then the group stays the same. It's Ann and Gus and I. We've got a starting point on the list of questions. If Kimberly can just find an example of somebody who's done this well and send it to us, then we'll start enhancing it. I've got to admit that while I will review the list of questions, I think I'm going to defer to you, Ann, because you've already done the legwork there to complete the question section in the format once we see what Kimberly sends us. I've got a lot more narrative I could write. I don't know if it's irrelevant or not, but I'm making a case essentially for why we're asking some of the questions we're asking. You follow me? If that makes any sense. Gus, what I would only ask of you is to contribute immediately what you can on the sections you previously had been assigned, and then we'll talk about getting together for an edit pass over the weekend. Does that make sense?
Yeah, my hazardous materials stuff I think is done, but yeah, I'll work on the transportation.
Okay. So Ann, let's wait and see what we get from Kimberly and we'll talk tomorrow.
Sounds good.
All right, we will need a letter though, that the council's going to see for the first time. And my thought, subject to any of you disagreeing with this, is going to be, here's the list of questions we've developed. We look forward to your reply, blah, blah, blah. If you want, we could also put in a statement about whether we oppose or support the project. I did propose putting into this document a list of prerequisites. In other words, we're not opposing it, we're supporting it if the following things are done, in the spirit of maybe that's a more constructive message. I welcome your thought on that before we put the letter together. Should we say we support it, we oppose it, we support it with conditions? What?
I would think we need to make sure that we're doing what's appropriate at this stage. If we're just commenting on the draft EIR, I'm not sure if we're supposed to make those kinds of comments. What do you think?
I would not make extensive comments. I would just keep it short and sweet. Burnett just sent a link, which is actually a wonderful document related to the draft EIR for the Delta Conveyance Project from July 2022. It's in the chat.
I'm not on.
Yeah, I see it. I don't see an example, but it's a
good guidance.
Two-page, yeah, two-page guidance.
But I could get the link.
I would still like to see somebody's comment on some other project that was well done. I don't care what, whether it's,
I'll send
transportation
something
project.
But this is a very good guidance document.
Thank you, Burnett.
Thank you.
Somebody email that to everybody.
I'm trying to do it.
Okay.
See if I succeed.
It's in the chat.
Yeah, but
Most
people
of us
would like
have
it in
on the chat.
email.
Okay.
But I definitely.
All right. Do we have
send any
any further?
We don't support.
I'm sorry. Any further council discussion on this? Okay. Hearing none. Then the next agenda item would be council member activity, if I recall. Who wants to speak on council member activity?
I have one item.
Kimberly,
I just want to note that the Harbor District proposal to dredge the harbor and provide sand replenishment for Surfers Beach was approved by the Coastal Commission last week. It was approved as submitted with conditions imposed by Coastal Commission staff.
okay. If
I'm
no
gonna
one
say-
else has council member
Oh, yeah, I do.
activity,
I went to
Dan.
the supervisors meeting and other than what Mike told us, the only thing that may be of interest that people might already know is the purchase of La Quinta Inn in Millbrae. That went through, even though there was, hundreds of residents who came out in opposition. But they purchased that for homeless housing with room key. I'm trying to think what else at the meeting. I think that was primarily the meeting. It was most of the day. And then Kimberly and I and Len all went to the Connect the Coast side. We participated in a meeting and kind of gave some feedback before they go to the public on the 19th. So that'll be the time that they kind of come forward to the public and present what they're doing. And then I assume we will all, as a council, get together and form an opinion or something on that, because I think that, there's pros and cons, so. But it'll be important for the community to see. And one thing they did say is that if the community does not support it, that then Caltrans would not go forward. So it's important that the community approves what is being proposed. That's it.
All right, Len, I know you want to speak on transportation activities, so please go ahead.
Relatively brief, as Ann just mentioned, there was a review to provide comment for the team that will present to the community next week. So you'll hear about that then. The work on the multi-asset road is still working on submitting a development permit sometime in October. So there's nothing yet to look at to follow up on that. Separate from that, there's several pieces of the parallel trail that need review and discussion. And again, that's something that I'm working on, but it's not ready to bring forward or involve people now.
That's it?
That's it.
Okay, thank you. Dan?
Yeah, my question to you, Greg, is why wasn't I notified for that meeting?
For what meeting, Dan?
The Caltrans meeting.
Oh, no, Dan, that was just so Lynn, Ann, and I are the sort of the work group with Chandra Singh.
Yeah, but I thought that I was on that work group, and I thought I requested to be on that work group.
Oh, I didn't know that.
Gus or Len, can you review what the assignments and the subgroups of the transportation? There's two groups. Len, can you?
The one, yeah, just a sec here. Yeah, the review there was actually came a request from Chanda for members, and I think in the Moss Beach area, as far as I know, there are only 2 MCC members designated at that point. So
Chandra requested the members to come to the meeting?
Yes.
You said?
This was just for the Moss Beach corridor.
Right, I understand. So Chandra picked the members of this council to join her.
Correct.
That's what you're reporting. Okay.
All right, so Dan, let me be clear here. Gus, you have a piece of the transportation puzzle also. Can you remind
which
us
is
what that is?
Yeah, the Miramar and El Granada pieces.
And
It's
that's
like
the multi-asset project
yes.
that's been digesting the EIR, draft EIR for submission to the county. And at this point, they're saying they expect to have that out in October.
Okay. All right, thanks.
So
Did somebody say something?
Kimberly has her hands up.
so I just
Go, Kimberly.
just some clarity here. I mean, so our subgroup is Ann and I, and Greg by default is the third, but I didn't realize Dan wanted to be part of this group, and I'm happy to change that if you if you want to.
Well, I've always had an interest in Highway 1 traffic and infrastructure and whatever's planned, because I think, well, yeah, I've always been interested in that.
Yeah, I think having a third member would be great because we only have two.
Well, Greg was the default third,
Well,
but
I'm sure Greg wouldn't mind giving it up. Do you want to take something off your plate, Greg?
Thank you, Ann, for taking things off my plate. I endorse that completely. So Dan, you're on the group with Kimberly and Ann, okay?
Thank you.
Now that doesn't solve a problem of somebody else asking people to attend without notifying the rest of the council. So that's, I think, Dan's point, All right, I do want to comment on my council member activity. My memory fails. Did I mention the meeting I attended? It was a Democrats Club meeting where Mueller and Callaghan spoke. Have I previously updated the council on that? No. Okay, so at that meeting, Ray informed me that he was working with, I think it was SU's office and Caltrans to extend the broadband connection only down as far as Montera. Because what he learned was the reason we were dropped from the middle mile broadband initiative was the cost per mile was so much higher, about triple in our area. And so I had him repeat the comment that he had told them, I don't need to go 30 miles all the way to Pescadero. Just give me a couple of miles down to Montera and let Comcast link up with itself and we'll have redundancy. And so I made sure Harvey and Deborah Penrose heard him say that as well. That really would put Comcast in a monopoly position in a way. That's not a good solution for us. We want the middle mile broadband initiative to be an open vehicle for others to play on, competitors. That's part of the point of lowering the cost. And so we have that problem. We also have a deadline looming at the end of this month to submit grant requests. And of course, I don't have the bandwidth to write grant requests. Leo Gomez and I are working with Carlo Way of Half Moon Bay, who we're meeting with on Friday, and he's trying to advance submitting a grant. There are going to be complications. The county's still not granted us the money or formed a legal entity, but we might be able to get something going under the auspices of just the city of Half Moon Bay. I think you're all aware they withdrew us from the Middle Mile Broadband Initiative. We wrote a letter to Newsom. We had considerable advocacy on our behalf from Becker, Berman, and SU. So stay tuned. Separately, the SAM issue that came up is important. Time does not permit us to get into everything, but essentially the parties are disagreeing with each other, and there's a variety of procedural, I'll call them maneuvers, being performed, but basically they didn't agree to fund work that's called for by a federal lawsuit where there's already been a consent decree signed. And as a result, they've had to pay an extra $35,000 just to pay for the lawyer for the Ecological Rights Foundation to keep watching us while we're not doing what we're supposed to be doing. I will skip for now the details of who's doing what to whom and what games are being played. I don't know if the council wants to hear more about this, but it's a vulnerability we have in the sewer system. the intertie pipeline system, which, as you know, burst and spilled 3 or 4 million gallons. We're waiting to determine what the fines will be. I've been in touch with the Regional Water Quality Control Board. We really need to get that fixed. And to some degree, it relates to any more development, whether it's Cypress Point or Big Wave or anything else coming onto the system. Okay, so that's it for me, I think. Future agendas. As I see it right now, and speak up, Kimberly, you're going to do something with Scott on Montero Mountain restoration at our special meeting next Wednesday on the 20th. Is that correct?
Yes.
Okay. We'll also have a final report or list of questions and a cover letter for Cypress Point EIR. Do we have anything proximate coming for Harbor and Shoreline?
For the 20th?
No, for any date. Anything coming up for Harbor and Shoreline where we need to worry about getting it on the agenda?
I need to finish these other things before I can even
Good,
think about
good.
what
Okay.
what comes next.
We do have a hearing on the 27th on the Quarry Park off-leash dog issue. As I recall, we owe comments into the Parks Department before they finalize something to the Board of Supervisors. What do we have on the herbicide issue, Gus? Do we have any idea what's going to go on there?
I know Melissa, I think, has someone who or either wants to present herself or has someone who does. I have on my list of things to do to see if I can reach out to some other folks to get a different perspective on it. But I don't have somebody lined up yet.
So we're talking October sometime.
Yeah, October. Yes, definitely not in September.
Okay, we do have to discuss the Montero Hotel on September 27th. Who's assigned to work on that? I can't even remember who the ad hoc group that will prepare a review of that
And
is.
Kimberly and me.
Okay, thanks, Claire. Okay, and then going forward, we have Moss Beach SR1 project. And then we have this meeting at RCD's holding on herbicide, which is not an MCC meeting, but will be of interest. And then we just heard from the sheriff. The oversight group. Do we have any subcommittee people who want to work on developing a letter or a presentation of other alternatives to what we just heard today? Is there somebody here who wants to lead a subgroup on the sheriff's issue, sheriff oversight?
I'd work on that.
All right, sure. Gus?
Yeah, me and Scott will work on that if anybody else wants to.
But
Gus and Scott.
it's gonna be a very short response. Okay, yeah.
Yeah, short response slash.
Right.
I think before we have a letter written, we should just have maybe we should have had a deeper discussion tonight, but I think that we should have. It just kind of hit us tonight, and I think that we should have a council, discussion on this.
So you want it as an agenda item?
Yes, that's what we're asking for.
Yeah, I think before we put effort into writing, a letter, I think we should just have a quick, kind of talk about it. And then also, there were a lot of other counties that had similar systems that are operating already. And so I think we should just have a chance to really kind of look at all that, before we kind of come this,
We could do all that at a different meeting, or if you thought it was worthwhile, we could go around and just get a sense of the council as to where people are leading, so then they can work off of that. I don't need either way.
Well, the way I like to do research, I mean, I'd like to have, know the names of some of these counties and, just kind of get a little bit more, I don't want to think about it too deep tonight, but get some more information about how it's working in other counties, and the sheriff's response and the community's response and how, how's it working?
I agree 100% with Dan. I think that is, and to get both sides perspectives.
Yeah, learn more.
Exactly. I think it's a great idea.
And
Gus, do you have a problem with that? I'd like to contact the sheriff and see if they want to come talk about this too. As
I'll
part of
talk
that
to-
agenda. item.
Yeah.
No, I mean, I think we ought to hear from somebody from the sheriff's department.
Yeah, that'd be great.
I mean, they're the ones that are gonna be on the receiving end of this thing.
Yeah, well, they're, I don't know, maybe, yeah, but I think that they're pretty busy. Scheduling is gonna be
Well,
trouble.
One thing I
problematic.
just, one thing I just did was I reached out to Don Horsley. I don't know how he's doing, but as a former sheriff and supervisor, I'll be interested to hear what his opinion is on this. I don't know if he'd come to a meeting, but I could send the material or whatever he
Well,
says.
why
to
don't we
Gus.
find out how it's working in other counties first?
We will. I agree, Dan. Same time, we can do two things at once.
You want to take a minute to hear a story?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, about 3 months ago, I stopped in front of the Feed and Fuel in Half Moon Bay on a Sunday morning. And it wasn't open, so I was sitting in my car trying to figure out when they were gonna open. And the sheriffs pulled up and they made me get out of my car. They searched my car. They wanted to make sure I wasn't drunk. It took about half an hour. And then they said to me, we just want to demonstrate that we treat everybody the same. It doesn't matter how old you are, or what race you are, or what sex you are, we're gonna treat everybody the same. So
Poorly?
oh gosh.
They would treat everyone poorly?
Well, why do you think, why do you think they bothered you? Were you parked in a red zone or?
No, I was parked crooked.
Uh,
I just could have pulled in. There was nobody there. I wasn't in the lines properly.
okay,
And I was looking at my phone and they thought maybe I had passed out or something.
Wow, that's beautiful.
So,
Okay, well, the action item is that Gus and Scott are going to propose an agenda item. And you guys can help decide who comes, what we talk about, what we look at. Dan's point, I think, is good. Let's find out what others are doing. I think it's a good idea to try and invite the sheriff or some representative. Okay, we won't pick a date for that, though. You'll let us know. Does anybody have anything else on future agendas?
We'll put together.
Yeah.
Any public comment on future agendas? Seeing none.
Oh, yeah, and
I
well, we
believe,
still have the stormwater, right? Especially in El Granado, so I don't want to put that off too long. I mean, we still have.
Oh, it's a good point. Good point.
We don't want to forget about that.
Thank you, Ann. That will be me and Ann, I guess. Does anybody else wants to work on stormwater? All right, I'll add that to the list. Do I have a motion to adjourn? How does that work, Dan?
motion to adjourn. Does anybody object? Hearing
Hearing
no.
none, we are adjourned.
Yes.
Thank you all.
Thank you.
Recording stopped.